Hello and welcome back to the People's Planet podcast. I'm Simon. Joining me today is Adam Jones. Adam Jones is Managing Director of a North Wales-based business called Lyan Packaging Supplies, and they also have a trading division called Icertech. Adam, welcome. Thank you very much for joining us. Please give us an overview of yourself, your sort of career, and what the company does.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks for having me on your podcast. Bit of background about me. I originally did a master's degree in engineering, but didn't end up going directly down the engineering path. I joined this business in 2010. It's actually a family-run business. It was never the intention that I was going to join, but I got to know some of the other directors through some summer work as a student, and to be honest, when I joined the company, I did really enjoy it here, and that's what's led me to where I am now. So when I first, the company itself, we're founded as a general packaging merchant, but within that we've got the specialist side of the business, Icertech, which is all about temperature control packaging. So that's kind of getting goods from A to B in a cold, chilled condition. So it consists of boxes, insulation, coolants. It is single-use packaging by the very nature of what it does, because you can't really return all that back cost effectively on Royal Mail. So there's obviously a lot around sustainability with it all. And then, so I've been with the company 14 years. Since joining, I've got far more into the Icertech part of the business. I find it far more interesting. There's a lot more application. It's a solution, not just packaging. And I've been able to use a bit of my engineering in that, to sort of developing manufacturing, getting more hands-on involved in sort of product design, particularly with sustainability as well in mind. So yeah, I think that's a quick overview.
No, it's a fair overview. It's the quickest I've ever heard you explain the company, which is a nice change.
I'm conscious that I'm being recorded, so I don't want to make it too long.
But if I'd like to come back to the idea of family business and talk about packaging a little more in a minute. But let's just first see, how would you define sustainability personally, and how do you define it as a business? Because I think that definition really does give a clue to the reason why it is so important.
I don't know, I think whenever you think of sustainability on a personal level, I think everyone just goes straight to the environment, and that's probably true of me as well. So if I was at home, sustainability is more like, not driving the car as much, cycling, walking, recycling as much as you can, being mindful about the purchases you make and where they come from. Whereas in the business context, it's far more about, I talk about sustainability like sustainable growth. It's making sure we're making enough profit and growing our sales in a way that's sustainable, so we're not overreaching ourselves and putting the business in jeopardy. And it's also sustainability surrounding the people in your business, is looking after your staff, not having a high staff turnover. That sort of sustainable growth for me covers all three elements of environmental, people, and profit. I think that it covers those areas entirely.
I think you make a fair point there. You need to consider profit, especially as a business director, the managing director of a business, is in order to retain the staff, in order to do everything else, it needs to be facilitated by having a long-term plan and succession for your company. The company, as you mentioned before, is a family business, and you are within that family. Do you think that influences the company's perception on sustainability and choosing to make it quite important to their mission statement?
Yeah, massively. I mean, when I came into the company, my dad would always talk about this phrase of culture of care. We care because we are a family, and we do look at our staff maybe in a different way. And then in terms of the business structure, the directors and shareholders are two of the same, if that makes sense. So, I personally have a decent shareholding in the business. So, if you think about a larger, bigger corporation, the directors report to the shareholders, and quite often the most important thing to the shareholders is the return on investment, therefore profit. So I think that sometimes reflects that the environment is often used as a marketing tool, like look at us, look at what we're doing, but ultimately when it comes down to it, it's the profit that matters to the shareholders, even though they might say different. So I think the directors are more driven by just that. Whereas I think with a family business, if you've got personal views or morals you want to uphold to, and you're also the shareholders, it's easier to do that when you're not having to report to someone who just wants a return on their money.
I think that's a fair comment, and we will come on a bit later to looking at people, planet, profit, and how that ethos and mentality has changed what the company is doing, because I think that's quite at the forefront of a lot of companies. Let's take a step back and look at packaging itself then. The company, Lyan Packaging, the clue's in the name really. You sell packaging, and packaging has a reputation for a lot of customers. It's almost a microcosm of many environmental issues. They receive a product and it's maybe an excessive packaging or packaging that uses quite a lot of plastic. How do we get around the sustainability issues surrounding packaging?
Oh yeah, I mean, the first thing I'd like to point out here, one thing that always frustrates me is like when I see my old uni friends or people I know and I say I work in packaging, I think most people have quite a negative perception of packaging, because we've all been there on Christmas Day when you got like a toy wrapped up and there's all these cable ties and bits of plastic and it takes forever to unwrap. But, you know, with respect, that's been manufactured and packaged in China, and more thought could have been given to the packaging. I always like to make the distinction that the environment I work in, which is transit packaging, is it's a necessary thing to get your goods from A to B in any country like ours. You have to have something to package it in. So that's kind of what started the thought process for us more recently about coming up with this trademark of packaging with purpose. You know, we're not, the packaging we put into the market, we try and make it aesthetically appealing for the unbox, but ultimately we're not supplying it for cosmetic reasons. It is to get goods from A to B in a chilled condition, particularly. And that's what enables other companies to operate their business. It's almost a necessity. And then, in terms of the single-use element of it, it would be a big challenge to make our packaging returnable and reusable, because most of our customers use parcel couriers, and either the cost or the carbon associated with returning the packaging would be counterproductive to the actual commercial side of their business. So from our perspective, it's more a case of being responsible with the packaging we supply and not over-engineering it, where possible using the most recyclable options. So something like cardboard, I mean, straight away, it makes that single journey, it goes in the recycling bin and hopefully it sees another life. You can't get away from that single-use element of it. And it's not lost on me that, you know, I work at a business that does have quite a big impact on the environment, and we can't ignore that.
But I think a lot of the work that is being done is reducing that impact slowly but surely. How do you separate then the impact of a product and the impact of a business? Both are the same. You sell the products to be in business, but how do you separate and distinguish between the efforts you're doing to reduce the footprint of your products for your customers, but then the efforts you're going to reduce your organisational and your operational footprint?
I don't know if I wouldn't say I necessarily separate them. They fall under the same sort of ethos and way of thinking for me, but I think it's quite clear which is which. We if anything, I'd say the organisational stuff's probably the easiest thing to do. You know, this is no disrespect to companies like accountants or solicitors, but it's quite easy when your main impact is computer screens and travel to and from. I think it's, you know, those are quite easy things to resolve, and we've done a lot on our organisational impact in the way of solar panels, energy awareness, just in encouraging that sort of ethos with our staff, trying to limit the amount of miles we put on the road using Teams calls instead, putting HVO fuel instead of diesel into our trucks to reduce that by, I think, 90+%. The actual product impact's probably the trickier one, because in recent years we've put a lot more time and energy in coming up with recyclable solutions, and yet our non-recyclables still remain quite a popular seller, even though we try to encourage our supply chain. Otherwise, we're only one part of that whole chain. But something I've been quite impressed with in the last 12 months is the impact we've had on some of our supply chain in terms of encouraging them. Like a couple of our suppliers have gone FSC accredited. I think partly in thanks to ourselves pushing that agenda. And then we have had some wins in terms of customers going from non-recyclable fossil fuel packaging over to sort of paper-based or recyclable alternatives. But I see that as probably a 5 to 10 year journey to really make a big impact on in terms of the product side of things.
What is the biggest barrier that customers often have with an existing fossil-based solutions? Let's say polystyrene as an insulator. Why are they resistant to change to a more sustainable solution, maybe out of cardboard as a material?
The two biggest ones, and they do actually go hand in hand really, is functionality and cost. Quite often the alternative, it's probably easier in the cost example to use the foil liners as an example because they're non-recyclable, but they're also the lowest possible cost solution. So go into like the eco box that we do, it might go from costing £2 a solution to £2.50. Well, it might not sound much, but most SMEs that we supply, if they're getting through 10,000 boxes a year, quite simply aren't going to take that hit on their bottom line, even for the environmental positives. It sounds sad to say, but that is actually just the way it is. It's not through want of trying. Polystyrene is functionality really. If you take an example, there's customers that we supply who might use dry ice, for example, or they might use they might put like fish boxes, putting raw fish into the polystyrene molded boxes. And whilst there are supposed alternatives for these applications, they're not without quite big compromises, I feel, because most of your sort of recyclable solutions aren't great from a water permeability point of view. And then when it comes to dry ice, we have had customers use the Enviro solutions for dry ice, but usually you have to compromise on performance or you have to put more dry ice in, which comes at a much greater cost. So the position we're in at the moment, we do still supply polystyrene as a company. I'm not going to turn around and say, no, I'm not going to supply it because of environmental reasons, because ultimately that customer will still need to procure that from somewhere else for their application. But we actively continue to work on solutions. I believe when last time we spoke to Bangor University, they're in a big research project with another company now trying to develop an alternative to the fish boxes, but that's still not quite at that commercial level yet where it can be offered widely. So it's probably a lot more difficult than people realise to get everyone over from fossil solutions to paper. It's not an overnight thing, but I think we're trying our best.
You mentioned there a collaboration with Bangor University, and previously you've also mentioned how you've had a positive influence on the supply chain. How important is that collaboration for solving future problems associated with sustainability?
Yeah, it's really important for me to have the validation, and not the validation, but it's important that what we do is kind of corroborated by a third party, because in our industry there's just so much greenwashing. I mean, obviously I'm not gonna name names or try and give specific examples, but you do see a lot of people making false claims about recyclability of items. They don't always distinguish how you recycle it. They just say it is recyclable. Theoretically, anything's recyclable with the right industrial process or know-how, but when we talk about recyclability, we're trying to be clear about where and how. And I think by all the claims we make, being in conjunction with Bangor University, just gives that kind of don't know what the word I'm looking for is, but it just kind of validates that what we're doing is that credibility. And it's not just us saying it, it's also backed by the science and the people who ultimately know what they're saying, particularly with the life cycle analysis that you've been doing. We can verify the amount of carbon in our products and know it's a fairly accurate reflection of what the customer's buying.
Adam briefly mentioned their life cycle analysis, life cycle assessment, and Icertech are pretty forthcoming with this. They're really quite a leader within the industry. Adam probably wouldn't admit as much on the podcast, but I think it's really forward thinking to understand the life cycle assessment, the carbon footprint, and the environmental impact of every single product that they sell through the Icertech trading division, and have that information transparent and publicly available to customers to inform decisions, as well as to inform decisions within the company. So that is what Icertech are doing to really, I think, set themselves apart as a thought leader as well as an industry leader there. Adam, how have you embedded the sustainability then? We've talked about why it's important, and some of the challenges to customers and your product range. But how have you embedded the ethos of sustainability within the company as the company's leader?
I mean, there's quite a few things there. So obviously, when it comes to sustainability, I do try to lead by example. So everything I say and do, every time I'm in any sort of management meeting or even a main board meeting, I think sustainability is now kind of almost the first topic of discussion on a lot of things we do. Just at the moment, we're looking at actually legally changing our articles of association. So that's part of that start of the B Corp journey we're looking at. So we're actually going to sign off on holding ourselves accountable as directors, not just for profit, but also reporting on the people and planet elements of what we do. So, that's basically committing ourselves that when we do our annual reports for Companies House, it's not just a financial measure. I will also be measured against those other things. And then in terms of my decision making, we're putting more and more sort of budget and resource behind sustainable development of products. We've been having regular training sessions with staff to try and sort of encourage them about the sustainability. I think that's most of it from my point of view, but I don't know if you feel there's anything I've not.
I think you've almost sold what's been done short to a lot of instances. You only mentioned briefly in sentences, but putting solar panels on the roof, it was a massive capital investment on behalf of the company, but it was up to 60% of all electricity generated is now from renewable sources on site.
Yeah, that was that. Yeah. I actually get excited by stuff like that as well. So it sounds weird, but I actually get a buzz out of things that aren't just like, there was a financial, commercial rationale behind doing it, but I actually get quite excited when I go on my app on my phone and see the amount of carbon saved.
And I think that nicely shows that sustainability doesn't have to be at the detriment of profit, of cost. It can work in unison with both of them, and you can realise benefits across all areas. The other one that you mentioned was HVO fuel. Would you touch on that a little bit more, please?
Yeah, so HVO, you might have to correct. It's hydro-treated vegetable oil. So it's basically an alternative to diesel that can literally just be dropped into the same fuel tank with no adaptations to the vehicle required. We run a truck and a van. The van not so much, but the truck does about 30,000 miles a year, our own business truck, and it just wouldn't be cost effective or really an option for a small business like us to just go out and buy an electric truck. I'm not even sure how commercially available they are, but this HVO, I'm led to believe it reduces emissions almost, is it the high 90s, 98%, that tailpipe emissions. And kind of what excites me about that is you're not offsetting the emissions, you're just preventing them from going into the atmosphere in the first place, particularly on our own local roads. Our truck is no longer chucking out most of the emissions it was previously. It's almost gone to nil. It's about as close as you can get with a truck. But we're actually really fortunate with that a local company on the estate have a fuel bunker, and they just so happen to have invested in HVO to stock it. It is more expensive than diesel. Financially speaking, it will actually cost us, I believe we calculated about £1,000 more per year to make the change. But it was kind of weighing off that commercial side of it. I think £1,000 I think it was about 30 tons of carbon directly into our own atmosphere. I know you can buy the offsets cheaper, but I think not putting carbon in the first place or reducing what you do in the first place is far better for me than the offset side of things. So I thought it was a worthwhile change to make, just to really cement our sort of commitment as a company. And I think it sends a good message to the staff, to our stakeholders, that we're doing it.
I think it's an interesting debate there, and I've read and heard a lot more about it now. It's growing in the, do you inset or do you offset? As a company, if you've got a budget to purchase offsets, do you put that money back into the company and invest in things like HVO fuel instead, which actually make an active role in reducing carbon emissions? We mentioned people, profit, planet, and how that is incorporated into the Articles of Association for the company now. And we've talked a lot about planet and the environmental impact of both the operations and the product. Could you touch a little bit on people then? What does people mean from a sustainability perspective and your perspective?
I mean, when I think about people, I think, the obvious one is our own staff. We want to look after our own staff. We want to do right by our own staff. But then I just see it as almost like wider community, and then almost global community beyond that. I think the people element of it is not just about your own staff. It's about actually supporting your own community. So, the things that come to my mind on stuff like that is using local supply chains where possible, making sure that you're buying your products sustainably and from a people perspective, and that you're not. There's always that question mark of, if you import from countries like China, is that are they looking after their people properly? Are you exploiting cheaper labour in that regard? I know that can be a hard question to answer, but we're really proud of the fact that pretty much, 100% of our product in Icertech, the box, the insulation, the coolant, is manufactured here in Britain. And actually, I think almost all of it is either manufactured here on our own site or within a sort of 50-mile radius of this site. And we have quite close relationships with the suppliers and the people involved in that. And I think I've always been a big advocate of looking after my staff. That's not just a salary thing. That's just general welfare, whether it be mental health or just being sort of mindful of people's needs. Those types of things.
How do you do that? And can you give us some specific examples for people listening and they want to engage better with people, and one of the key stakeholders is staff? How do you get staff on board with sustainability, and how do you usually look after them as people? Any good ideas?
I just think it's just being understanding of people's circumstances. I think it's not necessarily what's fair. It's equality as opposed to fairness. If someone's like got a family emergency at home, you're just like, just take the afternoon off, don't worry about it, we'll cover you back, we've got you. And it's just being understanding of people's individual needs. And then in terms of the staff as a whole, I think we're quite keen to carry on that engagement, whether it be volunteer days. We do a monthly hairdresser, so my sister's a hairdresser. She comes in once a month and cuts everyone's hair at work, which, I mean, I think particularly for the female staff we've got, it's great, because it pretty much not only saves you money, but it pretty much saves you a day, because you can have your hair done at work and sit at your desk when the colour sets in. That's a bit of a cheesy example, I know, but
I think it shows that culture is important. You need to put a culture of care in place. As you mentioned, that was your dad's ethos originally with the company as well. Have a culture of care in place to help support the staff. You touched on volunteer days, and that was a really good thing, not only to improve mental well-being of staff, but also feed back into the local community and engage with the people and the environment around us. I want to now, Adam, look at some of the future plans. I know as of yesterday, the company achieved an EcoVadis rating of Platinum, which is the highest EcoVadis rating in the world. In the world, within our area, really. It's like Jeremy Clarkson. EcoVadis is an accreditation to look at sustainability of you and of your supply chain, and that platinum puts us in the top 1% of all companies within our sector. Is that just the start for the company?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, absolutely buzzing that we got the platinum status, because I was kind of in my head, I was hoping for gold, top 5%, so to get the top 1%, amazing. You probably know this about me, but as an individual, I genuinely I can be quite introverted, and I almost get not embarrassed, but I don't like to always shout and dance about it. But
Yeah.
I mean, the problem we've got is so many other people do shout and dance when they're not actually doing as much, and then that's where the greenwashing comes in. So I think it's something we've probably got to get better at, or I've got to get better at, is actually saying, do you know what, we are doing some pretty good stuff here, and maybe other people could learn. It sounds a bit arrogant. I'm almost embarrassed saying it, like genuinely. But yeah, in terms of going forward, I mean, I think I've always set out my stall. We are very fortunate to be in the position we're in from a kind of business success point of view, and the legacy I want to leave in my time in this business is particularly for my own children, and is to be able to be proud of what I've done, and for me that really does hinge on not just making a profit and being successful in that way, but actually being able to say, do you know what, I had a really positive impact on society, the environment, and the people within it, and that's what I would, on reflection, be most proud of. So in terms of the journey we're on now, I feel like this is only the start. We very, very much want to do B Corp accreditation, I think next sort of 12 to 24 months. There's a lot involved in B Corp. I think it's one of those, if you've not done it, you don't fully appreciate it, but if you have done it, you kind of know what a company has to go through. So that's definitely something I want to do, and I just want to continue the journey more so on our kind of product and scope 3 side of things, in terms of really sort of pushing our industry forward, not just us, but trying to make our whole industry a sort of better place to be in.
I think that's interesting. And B Corp is really, and it is, I implore people who are listening to go and have a look at B Corp. It's a really interesting accreditation that they have, and shows a company's commitment to all stakeholders, people, profit and planet, and is a really rigorous assessment. So good luck for that. I'm not saying good luck, I'll be doing
do you remember when you first met with me after I'd seen the requirements for B Corp? I think I nearly fell off my chair, but now I've got my head around it, I'm actually thinking, yeah, why not? I should be doing this.
I think it's a good set, and hopefully all businesses get that ethos at some point. To conclude then, Adam, you are a business leader, the managing director, and we may have people in a similar position listening to you in family companies or in companies that are larger. What one tip, give them one reason why sustainability should be on the agenda every time they have a meeting.
I mean, if the view I take is, if you're running a business and it's a successful business, which hopefully it is, like ours, you're probably comfortable in life, you're making enough money. I see it as kind of our duty to do this. It shouldn't be a legal requirement, and it shouldn't be forced on anyone. And I'm not judgmental about it either, but I do think if you're earning a decent living, really it should be your job to think about others and the environment, because let's be fair, the government are never going to go far enough, in my opinion, to enforce these things. I just think part of being a good person and to be proud of what you're doing is to not just think about profit, think about the other things as well.
I think that's a nice way to conclude. You have to look beyond the business sometimes and think about your impact of your operations. Obviously, nothing done from a sustainable point of view can be a detriment to the business, but it is nice to see you considering all stakeholders.
I mean, just to add to that, and you know this, Simon, I am extremely commercially minded. Throughout my time in this company, I've very much been driven commercially, and that's what's led to the success of the business. And trust me, I'm not I'm not going away in my hemp underpants to go and hug a tree, but I just think there's a balance to be achieved between sort of, it kind of upsets me in a way that I think as a society we measure a person's success by money quite often, and profit, and what car they drive, and I think there's just a lot more to it than that, and I think most people could hopefully reflect on that and agree that there is something in that.
Well, thank you very much for sharing some of those thoughts, sharing some of those ideas, Adam, and I hope that the listeners have got some ideas, not only as to give them a reason to pursue sustainability, but some interesting ideas to start with. So thank you very much for that. If you would like to get involved with the People's Planet podcast, please contact us on all social medias or drop us an email on peoplesplanetpodcast@gmail.com. That's all for this week, but we'll catch you soon. Thank you. Goodbye.
Thank you. Goodbye.